Hey everybody, what's going on? Today we're going to be talking about epics that I think are going to be really good in Doom Tower. I want you to keep in mind, we're not talking about the boss stages, we're talking about waves. You can't deal with the bosses if you can't get to them. So we're talking about wave management and champs that I think are going to stand out a little bit in the waves of Doom Tower. We'll talk about the bosses when they come out. We get a little exposure to them. We'll solve those problems together and I'll get guides out on those as well. But for now, I just want to take a look at some champs that stand out to me as someone who really likes TOA and Summoner's War and this type of tower style content in other games. There's a general blueprint you can follow. Unless there's a ton of deviation from the way that this generally works, there's kind of a blueprint. So we're gonna talk about some champs that stand out that I think are gonna fit into these blueprints nicely and be really effective at wave management in Doom Tower. So there's a few obvious ones that I'm not really going to talk about in too much depth. I've got a little list of them. There's probably more. I may be forgetting someone here, but Saris, of course, is good everywhere. she's really going to do well there. Luria is going to do well there. Seer, of course. Tyrell is going to be fantastic for this. He's got a lot of things in his kit. Let's briefly talk about Tyrell. I feel like he's not quite as popular as he used to be, and he kind of falls into the category now of underrated champs, in my opinion. We've got an A1 decreased attack, which is nice when you're picking and choosing. We've got an AoE decreased defense and a sleep. I think a lot of people forget this dude has a sleep, and sleep is actually going to be a pretty nice debuff in the later stages because it's going to get to a point where for a lot of players, at least at first, you're not going to be able to auto the waves. It's going to get to a point where you're going to have to manual the waves as you get deeper, and sleep, which is a generally easier debuff to land in this game, is going to be effective because it's not going to be so much about AoE, just AoE heavy hitters and trying to clear waves as quickly as possible. It's really going to get down to locking down these waves, minimizing their turns, and picking your targets and taking them out. So having this AoE defense break with a sleep is going to be huge for that. That's going to be very, very nice to have. And then he's got an A1 stun with turn meter reduction. And again, anytime you can double up on something like crowd control and turn meter manipulation, that's going to be huge in these situations because, again, locking down these waves is going to be crucial because it's going to get to a point where if they start getting turns, you're going to be screwed. Historically speaking, again, I don't know exactly what's coming, but I know that generally when new content comes out, especially in Raid, it's harder than maybe is reasonable, right? So it's already going to be harder. It's supposed to be hard already. So being able to lock down waves is going to be crucial. And then he's got a defense buff to boot. So I didn't plan on talking much about him, but I wanted to just shine a light on him real quick. Gorgorob, Mausoleum Mage, Miscreated Monster. These guys that are the popular epics, they're popular for a reason. They're going to be useful just about across the board. So I'm not going to talk so much about them. We're going to talk about some semi-popular epics, but I want to talk about why they're going to be good and all that. So that's not Oathbound. That's not Aaron. Where's Oathbound? Is this him? Yeah, Oathbound. He got a buff a little while back, 1 or 2 balance patches ago. Pretty substantial buff. He's a pretty nice champ now, and he's got some interesting things going on that are going to be really helpful. One, he's defense champ, and he scales on defense. That's always nice. Anytime that you can capitalize on that, making someone tankier and increasing their damage output, gonna be nice. A1 freeze, again, it's gonna get to a point where you're having to pick and choose your targets. This is gonna be nice. You can also get this up to a pretty decent chance. So that is something to consider. 50% chance freeze on an A1, gonna be pretty reliable, right? On the A2, on a 3-turn cooldown, AoE decrease attack, and then AoE turn meter knockback. Skilled up, again, a very good chance. And it's 20%. It's not huge, but it's on a 3-turn cooldown. So when you're thinking about the fact that you're gonna be trying to maximize crowd control, AoE decrease slow, turn meter knockback in multiple instances, it is not unlikely, if you're turn cycling well on your end as well, that he can keep spinning this around and you can keep running laps around enemies and keep them from getting turns at all. This is nice on a 3-turn cooldown, especially if you're running with any kind of cooldown reducer. You know what I mean? That there's comps you can put together around this that are going to help him lock waves down, which is going to be huge. And then just icing on the cake, we've got a 4-time random hitter block cooldown skills. If they're under decreased attack, it's 100% chance to land, which means it relies solely on your accuracy. This is nice too. A little bit of a bummer that it's random, but it is what it is. It's still going to be nice. It's almost always going to hit multiple targets. Sometimes your 4 randoms are going to go into 1, but that's going to be rare. You're going to be able to spread this out a little bit. So you're blocking cooldown skills if they end up getting turns. You're knocking back turn meter. You're putting decreased attack up, which in most cases is going to decrease damage you're taking. And an A1 freeze. That's a lot. That means everything he's doing is impactful in the run. I think he's going to be really, really nice for the waves in Doom Tower. And I've kind of split this up into sections, so we're kind of talking a lot about turn meter management here, and we're gonna kind of work our way down through the different sections of this. And I'm gonna try not to make this video last too long. We've got more that we're going over here than we did legendaries in the legendary video, so we're gonna try not to make it last too long. But I also don't want to rush through it too fast. Next up, we've got Sylar. She is a pretty killer champ. She's not unpopular. We know Sylar is pretty dope, right? Her lead isn't going to do you much good, but she's all AoE, which means there's an opportunity here for stun set, sleep set, some sort of crowd control set on her. That's just going to further multiply her effectiveness in here. So her first one is a straight up AoE. Now, here's a thing to consider in someone that's all AoE. It's going to make sleeps harder to use. So you're either going to have, if you're going to run a sleep set on her, you're going to have to hope she does it regularly, or you're going to have a comp set up in a way that's going to be able to take out someone every turn, basically, right? Which can be more difficult to do, again, when the waves start to get more difficult. So sleep set is possible here. Stun set's ideal, because you can't knock a stun off somebody, right? You can wake someone up out of a sleep. You can't knock a stun off of them. So something to consider. A2, you got decreased accuracy. We've found out recently that decreased accuracy is a pretty handy debuff. If you can keep those debuffs off of your team, you're going to do well, right? Stu put a lot of emphasis on this with Dilgal and Spider, and he was also showing it off in Dragon. It's very helpful because, again, especially when these enemies start to get to these crazy levels, if you've got a defense break on somebody and they take a hit, they're probably going out. Like that's just that's just the way that goes. Especially in this game where a lot of people are focusing defense a little harder than in other situations. You know, HP is a bigger deal in other games, it feels like. And here it seems to be a lot more about defense. So if you get a defense break, you're going down. If you get an attack break, your damage is mitigated in most cases. You know, debuffs suck, especially slows. You don't want to catch slows in Doom Tower, so decreasing the enemy's accuracy is going to be nice. It's a really good chance to land. Obviously, skill it up, it's even better. 3-turn cooldown. Again, you're going to be trying to turn cycle. It's going to be nice. Here, we've got a 30% decreased speed debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. Decreases the turn meter of all enemies by 40%. You can get it down to a 4-turn cooldown. This is huge. This is really, really nice. One, because you don't have to hit them, so it's an opportunity that if you're using sleeps on your team, it's an opportunity to do something impactful without having to wake everyone up, because there's no damage being dished out here. This is going to be a killer skill for Doom Tower. So if you've got her, highly recommend you put her to work in Doom Tower. She's going to be fantastic for this, especially in a stun set. Stun set's going to be ideal for her. And I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit for this one, but in conjunction with that decreased speed, I want to talk about Tanix. I have been getting more and more fond of her the more I've used her. I threw her into some earlier comps when I was doing the Chamfort video and stuff, because I was trying to put together comps of champs that weren't really popular, that didn't seem too great, and her contribution is much greater than I think she gets credit for. And I'm actually working on some stuff with her. I want to put out some more videos about her specifically. I am a big fan of this champ, primarily because of this. She attacks 2 times at random, heals all allies by 3% of her HP with each hit on targets under decreased speed. So if you have an AoE decreased speed, then she's healing. And you can get her HP up pretty high, right? Mortal sets, HP sets, something like that. And it's a pretty substantial heal for an A1, right? It heals all allies. And it's not by damage dealt, so she doesn't have to be built for damage. You can build her pure support because she's healing based on her own HP. That's really nice. She has a single target attack that puts a decreased speed on the target. If she crits, it's AoE. Now, this is nice because if you don't have another good AoE decreased speed, she can set herself up to do the heal. But if you've got someone else that can kind of piggyback with her and keep decreased speed up, then even better. But she's got a kit. It's a very simple kit, right? She's there to do a thing, and she does it well, and she sets herself up to do it. You don't have to build around her to make this happen. She's got 2 skills, so when the fight starts, she's going to start off with this one. If you put the crit rate on her, she's going to put decreased speed on everybody, and then while it's on cooldown, she's going to continue to heal the team. It's a fantastic little kit, very simple but very effective, and it complements itself, which is always nice. Beyond that, she's got a passive that decreases the damage all allies receive. She'll take the damage instead, and I mean, obviously you can't stack this passive, so she's great support. She's decreasing the damage the team takes. She's setting herself up to do her heal, and again, it's a very nice heal. It's 6% of her HP basically because she hits twice, and each hit heals by 3%. So I think she's going to be great support. Fantastic, and the AoE decreased speed is a very important debuff here. Because again, you want to slow them down, you want to speed yourself up, you want to control as much as possible. So you slow them down, you stun them, you knock turn meters back. Very effective. I think she's going to be fantastic for Doom Tower. I am excited to put her to work in there. I really like her. So we bounced down a little bit to talk about her, but paired with someone like Sylar, going to be killer. Kind of an unexpected one here that I think is going to be a fun one. I think that's an arena lead, right? Yeah. We've got Jingle Hunter. Attacks one enemy 2 times, 40% of placing a decreased speed if he crits. You're probably going to want crit on this dude because he does have pretty good multipliers. I did a video on him a long while back about him doing surprising damage and being really good. He's one that when I first started the game, I really liked, but his freeze wasn't reliable enough. But then they buffed him up, and now his percentages are much higher, and he's great. I really like this champ. So we've got a decreased speed on the A1. A2, 90% chance of placing a freeze debuff on all enemies if it kills an enemy, and you can get this to 100%, which means it relies on accuracy. This was the big buff, right? This used to be like 35% or something, and I think you could skill it up to maybe 50, and it felt so much less than 50, right? I tried to get him working so much in Arena, and it was so common that I would kill somebody with the first nuke, and he'd freeze no one. It was so unreliable. So now that you can get it to 100% chance and just let it rely on accuracy. It's a great skill. Multiplier is great. He does heavy damage. So now we've got decreased speed that he can spread around. We've got heavy nuke with crowd control potential on a 3-turn cooldown skilled up. And then his A3 attacks all enemies, decreases the turn meter by 20%. If he crits, again, you're going to want crit on him anyway. So he fills his own turn meter as well if it crits. And this gets down to a 4-turn cooldown. So decent AoE damage, turn meter knockback, big nuke potential on the second skill with crowd control, and a slow on the first skill. Gonna be great. Obviously, he's an attack champ. He's a little bit squishier. You're gonna have to work a little bit to keep him alive. But again, if you're running the things you should be running in Doom Tower, it's not gonna be hard. You're gonna be able to get away with bringing someone like Jingle Hunter in because the goal is going to be to not really get hit. You know what I mean? It's to lock down as much as possible. So if you're building the kind of comp you should be building, which we'll talk about in later videos, how to actually put a team together, depending on what the problem is you're trying to solve in Doom Tower, then you won't have trouble keeping someone like him alive. I think he's going to do really well in there. So moving on, I want to talk about damage, but not attack damage. We want to talk about other ways to do damage, right? That's going to be poisons, that's going to be bombs, that's going to be things of that nature, because again, you're going to get to a point in the higher stages where it's going to be a lot harder to nuke, especially AoE. So having AoE poisons and things like that are going to serve you well as you get into the higher stages. So Taurus is an interesting candidate. I feel like you're going to have to build carefully if you want to use him, but we have to talk about him because of this skill right here. He's going to put himself down to 1% HP and put an unkillable on himself for 2 turns, right? 80% chance of placing 4 5% poisons on all enemies. Skilled up, it's 100, which means it's all based on accuracy, down to a 4-turn cooldown. Stacking that many poisons on enemies in Doom Tower is going to be really nice. You have to build kind of specifically for it, because you're not going to be able to lock them down completely. That's going to be the goal, but it's not going to happen in most cases. So you want to take advantage of the times where they are going to get turns, and having this many poisons on them is going to take advantage of that, right? That's 20% damage that they're taking. If you are running someone like a Painkeeper or any sort of cooldown reduction, if you happen to have a Kymar and you can get this up more, now we're talking most of their health is gone if they get a turn. And if they happen to take that turn through a stun or a sleep or something like that, then even better, right? They take all the damage without you having to be punished for them getting a turn. So you're gonna have to build carefully around him. Someone like a Sinesha to follow up and bring his health right back up. Someone with a substantial heal is going to be ideal here, unless you're running someone like a Gorg, maybe that can bring him back. You also want to be careful about this. If the enemies have good crowd control potential, if they've got strips, if they can hit through unkillable things, these are going to be things to keep in mind if you want to use this dude. However, he can't be overlooked because that's just so, there's no one else that does this. So it's on one hand, he'd probably be a little too strong, I guess, if there was no punishment for placing 4. I don't even know that I would hate it if they reduced the number that he placed and got rid of this. But again, you can build around this to kind of negate the fact that he takes away all his HP. Sinesha will bring him right back up if you have her follow him up. So there's ways to use this effectively. And again, on a 4-turn cooldown, that's not so bad with the way that you're going to be trying to turn cycle. So again, kind of an interesting case. Have to build specifically around him, but the damage output there can't be overlooked. That's going to be nice. Next in line, we've got Galkut. Now, bombers haven't really gotten a lot of play in Raid, and that's usually because they don't build them correctly. There's this weirdness to the way they approach their bombers where they still want to force you to need crit rate in a lot of instances for them to truly be effective, which is really silly to me because one of the whole appeals to a bomber is that they just do damage based on attack. It's pure damage. They don't need the crit rate. So for them to continue to make it where bombers need crit rate to fully be utilized is really annoying. And that's kind of the reason they don't get played with a lot. I got through a lot of the later stages of Ogryn bombing. I used War Mother and Galkut and some crowd control and Maneater, and you set it up a certain way. There's very serious damage potential that comes with bombs because the damage is not mitigated at all. It's pure damage. So like for someone like a Faceless, where it's like ignores defense and hits through shield and all that stuff, it's pure damage. I'm actually not 100% sure if bombs hit through shield in this game, but I do know that it's not mitigated by any stats. So when you get up to these higher stages and the enemies have crazy defense, bombs cut right through that and do a number based on your attack. So you could stack his attack way up and get some good damage. Again, bombs are going to wake sleeping enemies up, so stuns are ideal for instances that you're trying to control, but good damage. Now, he's not a bad champ on other fronts. He's got an A1 defense break, which can't be overlooked, especially when you get into the later stages and you're having to pick and choose your targets. Getting this defense break on somebody is going to be nice. We've got attacks all enemies one by one in a random order. Damage inflicted decreases by 25% after each hit. I always thought that said increased, actually. I just now realized that says decreases. I always thought it said increased. Either way, it's decent skill. You don't have to use it, right? If you can't auto through and you're having to manual anymore, and you're using sleeps, you don't have to use it, right? You can just stick with this and then get the bombs up when it's convenient for you. But he puts up 2 bombs on a 4-turn cooldown, and it's good damage. It is good damage. And then he's got a dungeon crit rate lead, which again doesn't make a lot of sense. He also doesn't need crit rate. It's always nice to have a detonator, and War Mother does need crit rate to detonate, He actually doesn't need crit rate. He's not a bad bomber. He's a decent bomber, right? 2 turns, that's not a lot of time for the enemies to get rid of them. And A1 defense break. Gonna be a decent champ, right? Again, maybe have to build kind of specifically around him. But bombs are, I think there's some potential for bombs to be useful in Doom Tower. As well as Soul Drinker. Now, here we've got counter, what's the word? Decreases the ticks on bombs, however you want to say it. So this will be nice if Galkut, for example, puts up bombs on the enemies and you want them to blow up sooner on someone, A1 that champ with him and potentially get them out. So someone like someone with a good cleanse, if there's a bad L in the way versus Thalia or something like that that's really aggravating, hit her. Get the bombs reduced so that they just go off when she gets a turn. She's probably gonna die with 2 bombs on her. Again, I don't know how they're gonna scale. I don't know how what the champs are gonna look like in the later stages, but there's some decent potential that she'll be taken out of the picture with the bombs. Again, you've got more bomb detonation, so this is pretty cool too. Kind of an interesting champ here. And then he's also got an AoE bomb, but his detonate after 3 turns. So that's a long time. That's that's a long time. Again, you'll be trying to crowd control. He can come in behind himself and decrease the detonation on some of those, but three turns is a long time, just flat out. And then two bomb debuffs on each enemy that detonate after 2 turns when he dies. If you're running a reviver, this is kind of an interesting one. It allows you to build him squishier. He can still contribute when he dies, and then a reviver can bring him back. So I think he'll be interesting. I don't know that he'll be meta. I don't even know that bombs will be meta, but I wanted to talk about them just in case you haven't really paid a lot of attention to the bombers and don't know that there is some potential there. I wanted to talk about them. Orcs. We've got, where's that fathead dude at? That's Torture Helm. I still do it. Every time. Every time. Who the hell is Husk? I do this every time. Every time I'm looking for Husk, I do this. There he is. I hate that. I don't know why I always think this dude's an orc. And then when he's not, it throws me off. This has happened to me in at least 3 other videos. I always think Husk is an orc. He's got an A1 provoke. Again, picking and choosing your crowd control is going to be nice. We've got an AoE stun. We've already talked in depth about why that's going to be good. And then damage increases according to his own HP. Get it down to a 3-turn cooldown. He's an HP champ, scales on his own HP, and it increases according to his HP. So probably some good damage potential there. I haven't done a lot with Husk, but on paper, this kit is pretty nice, right? AoE stun on a 4-turn cooldown, provoke on an A1, pretty good chance skilled up, and decent damage potential. AoE stun, if anyone's got an AoE stun, they're probably going to be able to be used in here. I think there's a little bit more potential here because he has some good damage output and a provoke on the A1. So, worth thinking about. Zelota, another one. If you're running sleeps, again, this is going to be when you're running sleeps, you're going to be running single target defense breaks unless you've got someone like a Ceres or Draco that puts it up without having to hit. But single target defense breaks, big damage single target nukes, right? This is when sleeps are going to shine. He's got an A1 sleep, so again, picking and choosing, we've talked about that. Shield buff, continuous heal on all allies, and the shield goes up as you skill it up. Pretty good shield, continuous heals on the team is nice to have. Lets them kind of passively heal as they get turns. And then an AoE sleep, 100% chance on a 5-turn cooldown. Again, going to be real nice, especially if you've got someone like, like Sylar, knocking turn meters back without having to hit. And again, big single target focus here, so that your runs will be longer, but this is for later stages when you're having to manual. Again, this kind of stuff's gonna be really nice. In Summoner's War, there's a really good Nat 5 / legendary named Hathor. She's got an AoE turn meter reset sleep skill. It's ridiculous. And what it allows you to do is bring in a good defense break that's single target, and then a couple of heavy nukers, right? And again, AoE like turn meter knockback, slows, shit like that. So, and by the time you've killed someone, and the enemies wake up, she gets to do it again. That's kind of what you're looking for here, right? This skill is not nearly that good, but same principle, right? Put the sleeps up, try to get turn meter knockbacks without having to hit, try to turn cycle around them, single target, pick your opponents out, and get through the waves that way. And then moving right along, I want to talk about a couple of support champs. Make sure there's no one in here I want to talk about before we move on. The new one that just came out, Bergoth, I think is going to be nice. This cannot be overlooked, man. This cannot be overlooked. One, he's an HP champ with good base HP. He scales off HP. He's got an AoE 2-turn provoke that gets up to, what, a 60% chance scaled up on 4 turns? AoE 2-turn provoke at a 60% chance on 4 turns. That's going to be nice. He puts continuous heals on himself if he crits. And he heals all allies when he gets hit by 20% of the damage received. Except himself. But he's putting continuous heals on himself, so that's fine. Again, very simple, but I think very effective. This is a lot of lockdown. This is a lot of crowd control. And if you're turn cycling and you've got, or cooldown reduction, any of that going for you, it's almost permanent focus, right? So as long as he's not getting killed by provoking everyone, I think that's going to be great. I think he's got a lot of potential to shine in there. Another one that I want to talk about is Cardinal. Just an excellent champ. Just crazy how good she actually is. She's got poisons on the A1, which again, if you're single target picking who you want to kill, she can stack poisons on them pretty nicely. She's got a nice heal, 30% of their max HP, and a defense buff on an ally on a 3-turn cooldown. So even though it's not AoE, she can get this around, right? She can spread this around a decent bit. She should be able to get this off a couple of times at least per enemy turn if you're setting up your comps correctly. And then on a 5-turn cooldown, revives all dead allies, heals them by 25% of their max HP, and boosts their turn meter to max. Revives all dead allies, heals them by 25%, and fills their turn meter. So she brings everybody back and they get a turn, and that's on a 5-turn cooldown. That's pretty substantial. That's going to be some hard to match support there. Hard to match. What is Doom Priest? Doom Priest. Again, simple kit, but nice. Primarily because of the passive. Every turn she's removing a debuff from the team, and she heals all allies by 7.5% of their HP. So every time she gets a turn, she's removing a debuff from everyone and healing the team. You get her on a relentless set, and she can do that multiple times occasionally. It's going to be huge. She's basically going to keep debuffs off the team, keep everybody relatively healed up, and be very nice. On top of that, she's got an attack buff on a 3-turn cooldown where she doesn't have to hit enemies, which is nice. And then here she's got a single target hit that puts a crit rate buff on a random ally. Not really a big deal, but it's nice. So she doesn't have to ruin anything for you with any AoEs. She's just there for solid support throughout. Passive, there's nothing that can be done to stop it. If she's stunned, whatever it is, she's still going to do her job. Killer champ. Killer champ. We talked about Tanix already, so the last one I want to talk about, maybe an unexpected one too, is Flesh Terror, who I don't, his color scheme looks so sharp to me. That detail looks so, I love that. I think it's so cool. Kind of an interesting case here. Again, kind of unexpected, but I think has some potential to be usable here. He transfers a random debuff from himself to the enemy, which is interesting. He heals all allies by 30% of their HP and increases the duration of all buffs by 1 turn. This is really nice. There's a lot of potential here. You can keep defense buffs up longer, continuous heals up longer. There's some really important things that this can do, right? It can turn some debuffs into permanent, it can turn some buffs into permanent buffs, whereas there might have been some situations where there would be a gap waiting on someone to be able to do their buff again. This has potential to turn them into permanent buffs, so that's pretty nice. His A3 attacks all enemies, decreases the duration of all enemy buffs by 1, and increases the duration of their debuffs by 1. This is also really nice. This can remove things. Say you've got a Valkyrie and that counterattack's been up. This either takes it off if it's already been up or gets it closer to being taken off, which can be huge. Also increases the duration of all enemy debuffs by 1 turn. To my understanding, you can't increase the duration of crowd control stuff, so you can't do it to stuns and things. I don't know that. I don't remember. I feel like that's a thing, but it's still nice increasing the poisons and slows, and the slow in particular is something you're going to want to increase a lot. But defense breaks, any debuff that you have up that you can increase is going to be nice. 4-turn cooldown. You can try to get him on a stun set, incorporate a little crowd control into that as well. Couldn't hurt. Has some potential. Again, I'm not sure that he'll be an MVP or anything, but there's something there, right? There's something there that decreasing the duration of buffs, increasing enemy debuffs, and then also increasing your team's buffs. There's something there. You can get them both down to 4-turn cooldowns. I think he's going to be interesting. He's usable, so if you're on a budget and this is what you got, there's some potential for him to contribute pretty heavily. So that's it. There are, of course, I mean, obviously Steel Skull, a lot of epics. You're going to be able to find places for a lot of champs, and that's one of the things that I really like about Doom Tower is that it's very rarely super specific. There's a lot of opportunity to really flex your team synergy options here, right? Faction Wars is cool, but Faction Wars, you're locked in, right? So some factions aren't equipped to work together the way that certain teams are. So for Doom Tower, you can bring anyone, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of potential. So obviously, I'm not gonna go through and just talk about every single epic. There are definitely gonna be epics that I didn't talk about that are gonna shine, and there may even be some obvious ones that I have overlooked here. But these will be things that we'll get to figure out when Doom Tower comes out. We can go in and start playing around with it a little more, and you know, see what else is possible. That's really what we're waiting on, is for it to come out so we can just see what's possible. And we'll work on some team comps from there. I'm going to do a lot of content on Doom Tower. I would expect, you know, I've said multiple times, it is usually my favorite thing in these games. I'm pretty excited about it, and there's probably going to be a lot of videos on my channel about Doom Tower when it comes out. So that's it. I know this was a longer video. I tried to trim it down as much as I could, but there's a lot to talk about here. So if you have any champs, any epic champs that I didn't talk about that you want to leave some notes on below for anyone that might go into the comments, more information is always better. I'm not opposed to that at all. So I'm interested to hear what you guys think about the champs on this list. I'm interested to hear what you think about some champs that are not on this list as well. Any ideas you have for some comps that maybe aren't popular. I'm interested to know what you guys are thinking with all this. So I hope you're pumped. I'm getting pumped. I think we're getting close. They said the early part of December. I don't know exactly what that means, but it should be coming soon. Coming soon. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. I appreciate you guys watching. I hope it helped you, and we'll see you later.